Welcome to the Modise Network. In the show today, we focus on the crime situation in Joburg and the response by the authorities to crime across the country. And later we discuss the proliferation and dangers of fake news and conclude with the fourth industrial revolution opportunities, especially for women. Earlier this week, the Minister of Police, Bheki Cele, published the national crime statistics that indicate that South Africa remains a violent country. The Mayor of Joburg, Herman Mashaba, has long complained about the approach of the national government in fighting crime, instructing his council to start a campaign called Operation Buya Mteto. His key man is the member of the mayoral committee, Michael Soon. In recent weeks, the Joburg Metro Police have had their hands full dealing with hijacked buildings, fake goods, immigration, and violent public protests. Michael Soon joins me in a moment. I'm now joined by the member of the Mayoral Committee of Public Safety in Joburg, Michael Soon, and we invite you to also share your comments, your views, using the hashtag the Modise Network. Mr. Michael Soon, pleasure to have you with us on the program. And earlier this week, the Minister of Police published the crime stats. And I wonder, from the Joburg perspective, what do you regard as the priority crimes?
Well, Tim, thank you very much for having me on your show. I think, out of our own JMPD stats that we release on a monthly basis relating to the crimes and crime trends, and of course, very importantly, the successes we are able to bring in. And we now look at the national crime stats have been released. This morning we again see a lot of the so-called contact crimes. Your robberies, your murders, your carjackings, and unfortunately, some of the highest ranking police stations where we see most of these crimes taking place are in Johannesburg. I think one of the issues that we focus on, of course, as part of metro policing, is drunken driving, which continues to rank #1 within our own crime stats. We see a lot of robbery, a lot of the violent crimes taking place in the city. But I think these stats, together with our own information, will be able to better assist us in deploying our resources, which is already very limited.
Well, but I notice also that in Joburg you seem to be focusing more, and I suppose that's the mandate of the Metro Police. You're focusing more on the bylaws, right, and things like hijacked buildings and counterfeit goods being sold in the street. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yes, Tim. Well, look, the legislative mandate of the Metro Police, in fact, all Metro Police is three. One, it's traffic management. Number two is bylaw enforcement, and three, it's crime prevention. And this is where we overlap with, the South African Police Services. That we're certainly not going to sit back and just to say, well, there's a crime happening, it's not part of our mandate. We will leave it to SAPS. And certainly that's not the attitude and the position we take. We, in fact, have gone out very proactively to deal with a lot of the crimes, especially in the inner city. Bad buildings you've mentioned, where these criminals are being harbored. A lot of the illegal activities happen within these buildings. Counterfeit goods is a perfect example. In fact, we've been engaging with the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations to say that how do we better deal with this kind of crime that impacts the country's economy so much.
What is the extent of those particular crimes? I mean, the hijacked buildings and the activities that go on there. Now and again, I do see reports about that.
Well, certainly, just a couple of days back, JMPD, again together with our internal group, Forensic Investigation Unit, had a raid on the bad buildings, and 31 suspects were arrested for various offences, including undocumented foreign nationals. And these are the very concerns that we have as the city, you know, especially in the city of Johannesburg, where we have so many buildings that's being illegally occupied, that's either being hijacked or occupied by slumlords, and they are renting out to a lot of the occupants. And then you breed other illegalities and offences and criminalities out of that, you know, illegal connections. People connect water and electricity out of legitimate sources and to supply into these bad buildings. We have seen, you know, time after time again from our integrated intelligent operations center, where the city's CCTV cameras are being monitored, that we see criminals would mug street pedestrians and immediately, you know, run back into these buildings. So these are the issues that we need to address.
How many buildings are we talking about, that at least if you have a sense of them, and where are they concentrated?
Tim, I must be honest with you, it must be over hundreds. And it's in fact one of our mayoral priority by our executive mayor, Councillor Herman Mashaba, to say that we need to turn these buildings situated mainly again in the inner city of Johannesburg into affordable accommodation, into student accommodation, into, you know, business premises where small and medium enterprises and small business people can actually afford to come back into the inner city and trade.
But I noticed you've got your own campaign, right? Buyamteto.
Absolutely.
All right, that's what you call it. And then the Gauteng government has got its own Operation Okay Mulao. Yeah. So I mean, which one is which here? If you are a resident in Joburg, how should you relate to these two different campaigns? And I wonder why you, as different tiers of government, are not working together.
Well, in fact, we started with the concept of Buyamteto.
Yeah.
You know, Buyamteto is a multi-focused program, you know, not just fighting crime, but in terms of enforcement of bylaw, you know, better managed traffic. So it's really all the capacities of the municipality, but one very important part of Operation Buyamteto is to focus on crime. I think the provincial operation, Operation Mulao, came after our Buyamteto, but even with that, we still find a lot of common grounds. We certainly, as the city of Johannesburg, want to work with the provincial government. In fact, we work with the South African Police Services very closely in terms of JMPD, that we have joint operations, we have crime prevention operations, both during the day and at night, where SAPS and JMPD work perfectly together. And we are really seeing good results coming out of those joint operations.
And what are the typical challenges that you face from the residents? Because sometimes, you know, we can look at the city as a service provider, but not do our part when it comes to helping reduce levels of crime in the city, and of course all the areas where the city council is responsible.
Tim, I like the way you put it. You know, it's a very pertinent question, that public safety is not the government's responsibility only, but in fact is everybody's responsibility. Our public safety department is responsible for JMPD, the emergency management services, that's your fire brigade and ambulances, your licensing department, you know, our disaster management, and of course, you know, as I mentioned earlier, the Integrated Intelligent Operations Center. So as soon as we have this synergy between residents and the municipal government, we can then better, you know, deliver services. For example, you know, if we all begin to understand that we need to change our own driving behavior to ensure that, one, traffic flows freely, and secondly, that we don't go out and commit offences in terms of traffic laws. Secondly, when you see suspicious activities happening, you know, please report it to the police. Don't just sit back and say, you know what, rather, you know, for me to call the police, I'll just instead, you know, post something on the social media and think that the matter will go away. It doesn't. And of course, you know, coming back to licensing, a lot of you know, scrupulous operators who want to take that gap and say, you know what, I can get your license, you know, at a cost, but you know, we know that's all illegal and that's not legitimate. But there are still operators that want to do that. You know, they want to bypass the laws, either to obtain a license or a disc license. So there's all sorts of you know, illegalities that we as citizens can really be active in taking that stance and say, you know what, enough is enough. This is what we're going to do to ensure that our city is a safe one.
Well, you have run raids into some areas of Johannesburg, right? And people have criticized the city, the JMPD and your department, of being anti-foreigners. Can you explain what informs these raids, especially in places such as Rosettenville, Hillbrow, and the CBD?
One thing that we've openly stated always that we focus on the criminality of things and not on the nationality. In fact, we as the city, we welcome foreigners, foreign investment, foreign tourism. You know, a lot of the foreign residents in the city of Johannesburg, we welcome them with open arms. But what we are saying is that please enter our city, in fact, enter our country legally. And when you are here, please comply with our laws. When there's a crime being committed or there's an offence being committed, we don't differentiate between your nationality or the tone of your skin. We simply look at the criminalities and want to deal with it. So when we have to conduct policing operations, you know, safety operations, crime prevention operations, popularity unfortunately has to take a number two. You know, we can't be trying to appease or please criminals to say that we are not going to go out and conduct these operations so we are popular in the eyes of some. So we will continue with these operations. I think it's a very important tool to ensure that we restore law and order in the city.
Drug dealing, how much of a problem is it?
It's a major issue. Tim, it's really a major issue. It's something that has been left, I believe, by us as a country for many, many years, and we now see this epidemic of drug dealing at every street corner. At some places, people say that it's so easy for a grade 5 boy to find a drug dealer, but the police officers can't find them. And this is kind of perception that's been created out there. I personally have gone out with our JMPD K9 unit to go deal with drug dealing. Our mayor was with us. We've been kicking down, doors of drug dealers. And I think this is a problem that we can't isolate and say it's a Joburg problem. It's across the country. The national government and the provincial government really needs to come out with a more powerful and I think a high-level plan to say this is how we'll be dealing with the drug issue countrywide.
Whenever we talk about crime fighting in Joburg, and I think I may be accused of the same, we focus on what's going on in the CBD than other parts of the city, and it creates the impression that there are more crimes being committed in the CBD than anywhere else. But what is your experience from the work that you've been doing with JMPD?
Well, statistically, we do see a higher number of criminal activities within the Joburg CBD. I think it's number one because of the density, the population, and of course the urban layout the CBD is. But we're also seeing that from this morning's crime stats that some of the contact crimes are now spreading out to the outer skirt of Joburg CBD. For example, your car hijacking is now more prevalent in other areas. So the criminals also understand that when the law enforcement is hitting really hard in one area, they need to find other areas where it
migrates elsewhere.
Absolutely. So they will find easier places to operate. And this is a problem that when we are hitting them very hard in the city of Joburg, they tend to move out to other places. So this is where we can't do this on our own, but we need to adopt a collective approach in resolving the criminal issue in the country.
Well, let's see what happens if the different levels of government were to work together, the extent to which we would be able to reduce levels of crime in the country. I will be speaking to expert on this, Eldred de Klerk, policing specialist, who's joining us from our Cape Town studios. And of course, Michael Soon is still with me here, giving us the Joburg perspective of the crime situation in the country. We'll continue our conversation after the break. Don't go away.